Why do all these stories about unfaithful wives sound so cliché? Same synopsis. I came home early, found an email, caught her with her lover at the office Christmas party, happened to drive by the motel, and saw her car in front of her room. There must be other ways a cuckold husband finds out about his wife's cheating, or so it seems. But maybe not. Maybe there are only half a dozen ways a man realizes his marriage has just stopped dead in its tracks. In my case, I was so in love with my wife for 10 years that it took a real lightning strike for me to understand what was going on between my wife and her lover for the last 6 months. I had no idea. Shannon and I met during our sophomore year of college and felt an instant mutual attraction. She had rich brown hair and blue eyes, a pretty face, and a slender, toned body with long legs and average breasts. She was, in a word, perfect, at least for me. For all her virtues, her personality made me fall in love. She was smart, cheerful, and cheerful. I could talk to her for hours about everything under the sun. We were best friends, and 3 months into our relationship, Shannon gave herself to me in the back seat of my car parked behind the town baseball field. It was the brightest moment in my life at that moment. From that moment on, there was no doubt that Shannon and I would be together forever, or, as it turned out, for 10 years. My name is Stuart Gray, but everyone calls me Stu. I was born and raised in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. I am 6 feet tall and weigh 187 pounds. I am considered quite handsome with brown eyes and sandy hair. I am a contractor by profession. I have my own small company with a permanent staff of 5 people. We do mostly interior improvements for those who can afford it, and our work is considered excellent. Shannon teaches music at a local high school, and together we make a good living, have a beautiful home, and since we are both in our early 30s, we plan to start our family in the near future. As I mentioned, we had a wonderful first decade of marriage. Our sex life was amazing, although I won't exaggerate like some and say we did it twice a day every day, more like 3 times a week, but it was always loving and often hot and passionate. We cuddled before bed every night. It was an inviolable rule, and every morning when I woke up next to Shannon, I was amazed at how beautiful she was and how lucky I was to have her as my wife. I can honestly say that although I would prefer to live with her every day, if I had to sacrifice my life for her, I would do it without hesitation. I think that last sentence should have been said in the past tense because suddenly something hit me, something so unexpected and emotionally crushing that I still cannot say that I have fully recovered from it. As a contractor in the Midwest, the majority of our work occurs during the spring, summer, and fall. People just don't like their houses being torn apart when it's 5 degrees below zero and 3 feet of snow outside. Therefore, our vacations with Shannon usually fell on the Christmas and New Year holidays and spring break. During the summer, when I was busy making money, Shannon would sometimes visit her parents for a week, go shopping with her 2 sisters, or take summer courses to maintain her teaching qualifications. Our favorite trip every winter was to go somewhere warm, and in the winter of our destruction, we chose an all-inclusive resort in the Bahamas, 2 weeks in paradise for the two of us to reconnect in body and soul. However, I soon learned how wrong my thoughts were. First, I must explain that before Shannon and I boarded the plane in Minneapolis, I had not the slightest suspicion, and would have called you a liar and spat in your face if you had dared to imply that there was anything wrong with our marriage. Not this way. We were the perfect couple, madly in love and deeply connected in every way that it was almost as if we were one person split into 2 bodies. Our union was so strong that nothing in heaven or earth could separate us. I think I simply forgot that hell existed, and although I didn't know it at the time, I was teetering on the edge, ready to fall into the molten abyss. I got my first hint that something was wrong at the security checkpoint at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. The line was long, with many people trying to trade the bitter cold for the tropical warmth, and as Shannon and I stood in line to go through the scanners, I noticed a man in the next line giving Shannon glances. It wasn't unusual. My wife is attractive and men often give her slightly lustful looks, but this look was different, as if he was trying to get her attention. I wanted to know more and pretended to look at my boarding pass, while watching the man out of the corner of my eye. His glances in her direction were furtive, and then I noticed her quick glance in response and a subtle wave of her hand, as if she was saying, "Not now." He smiled and nodded, and I almost threw up my breakfast. I was stunned. Then I realized that they knew each other. How well, I wasn't sure, but the knowledge raised all sorts of warning signs. As we continued through security, I watched them closely, and there were no further attempts at contact on their part. I became very quiet, but for some reason, Shannon did not notice this. Apparently, her thoughts were occupied with something else. I hoped that this man, whoever he was, would not be on our plane, but when we sat down and took our seats, I saw that I was mistaken. He was sitting in an aisle seat 15 rows in front of us. Another thing that struck me as odd was that Shannon decided to sit in the aisle seat in a row. This had never happened before. She always wanted to sit by the window, but not this time. I asked her what was wrong since I had pre-booked her a window seat and myself a middle seat, but she simply said that her breakfast hadn't gone down well and she didn't want to bother anyone if she had to use the restroom. I asked the woman sitting in the aisle seat if she would mind switching places with the window, and when I explained about my wife's stomach problems, she readily agreed and the exchange was made. I usually fall asleep easily on planes, and the long flight between Minneapolis and Miami provided me with this opportunity, but in a state of heightened anxiety, I could not sleep on this flight, although I intended to pretend. We stowed our carry-ons in the overhead bins and Shannon placed her purse under the seat in front of her. Once we were in the air, I took out my twin's baseball cap and pulled it down over my forehead, pretending to fall asleep. I gave myself enough space to watch Shannon, and after 15 minutes she glanced at me and, satisfied that I was asleep, stood up and headed down the aisle to the restrooms. I turned in my chair so that I could see the whole aisle and noticed that, as she passed the seat occupied by the man whom I now assumed was her acquaintance, she put out her hand, as if to steady herself, and touched him for a moment's shoulder, another proof that something is happening between them, and this is not an accident. I noted that they weren't looking at each other, and Shannon headed to the restroom. When she came out a few minutes later, she looked straight at him, and he stood up and walked towards her. When they met in the aisle, instead of one of them turning to the side to let the other pass, they stood face to face for a moment. He put his hand on her waist, she touched his chest for a second and said something to him. They both smiled warmly, and as she continued to walk to her seat, his hand slid down her buttocks, making Shannon smile again. This was enough to understand that the two had known each other for a long time and were clearly close on some level. At the same time, it hit me like lightning that my wonderful marriage was in serious trouble and might already be over. I was suddenly overcome with such anxiety that I had to turn my face away from Shannon as she sat up and buckled her seat belt. How could she do this to me, to us? How long did this last? Who is this man, and how far have they gone in their relationship? I spent the rest of the flight trying to process everything I had seen and praying that when we changed planes to Nassau, he wouldn't be on our plane, but somehow I knew he would be there. Much to my regret, I was right. As soon as Shannon and I boarded the plane, I saw him sitting 5 rows behind us. He was reading the logbook and did not pay attention to us as we took our seats. Shannon, now clearly no longer suffering from stomach problems, took her usual place by the window. The flight to Nassau was uneventful, and upon landing, we collected our luggage, rented a car, and headed to the resort. Shannon was texting while I was driving. "Who are you writing to?" "Oh, just letting my mom and sisters know we've arrived." Maybe, I thought, but I would like to see for myself. Isn't it strange that when you begin to suspect, suspicions begin to accumulate? Our room was beautiful with a balcony overlooking the ocean and overlooking one of the pools. As we were unpacking, I realized I needed to make a statement to get my wife back, so I walked over to Shannon, hugged her, and kissed her neck. "Do you understand how much I love you?" Shannon turned to me and kissed me lightly on the lips. "I love you too, honey," she said. There was a strange light in her eyes, as if she was not here in the room with me. It gave me goosebumps. I kissed her again. "You know I would never do anything to hurt you, don't you, Shannon?" She shuddered slightly. I know, Stu. And I know that you would never do anything to hurt me or ruin our wonderful marriage, I said, and she winced again, and I saw tears building up in her eyes. Of course, Stu, you know I won't do that. But she couldn't look me in the eyes when she spoke. She just looked down at the floor. Then I realized that I had probably lost the fight. If she hadn't already, I now knew that she would soon give herself to another man. I let her go and quickly went to the bathroom, hoping I wouldn't lose my composure before I got there. I stayed in the bathroom for a few minutes, regaining my composure and asking myself the same questions over and over again. How did this happen? What did I do to push her into the arms of another man? Why didn't I notice anything weeks or months ago? But the most important thing is, what can I do to stop her from completely destroying us, or is it too late? I washed my face and left the bathroom. Shannon stood there with a strange expression on her face. Oh my God, Stu, I got my period and I didn't bring tampons with me. What? I said. Menstruation, Stu, it started. But it ended a week ago. How could it start again? I don't know, but sometimes this happens. Maybe the excitement of the holidays caused it. I have to go to the store and buy tampons. And she left, closing the door behind her. My first thought was, maybe this is good. This will slow down the romance between her and her lover. My second thought was, wait, this just doesn't make sense. This has never happened to her in all our years together. She's on the pill and her periods have always been like clockwork. Then why did she come up with this? Unless she thought that menstruation would stop me from insisting on sex so that she could devote all her love and passion to a new man. This must be so, and if it is so, then this is not the woman I married. No one can be so treacherous and cruel. She must really hate me for allowing me to plan and pay for this trip, to cut me out of her life and give everything she has to a man I have never met. I felt completely lost, like I was going crazy. Who is this woman I have loved with all my heart for over 10 years? As I looked around the room, I noticed that she had left her phone next to the TV. I turned it on without knowing if she had changed the password, only to find that she had not another mistake on her part. I went to her messages and read the latest from someone named Anthony Eisner. I scrolled to the beginning of the correspondence, which began when we were driving to the resort. Anthony, hey baby, God, you look so sexy. I can't wait to be with you. Shannon, you're so cheeky, you almost got caught by Stu at the airport. Anthony, I couldn't resist, Shan. I almost kissed you on the plane when we were in the aisle. Shannon, Stu was fast asleep, so you could, but it might look bad to others. I like the way you gave my ass a gentle squeeze. A little taste of the future. Lol, we should go. We're almost there. The correspondence resumed after we were in our room at the resort. Anthony, I'm in the lobby. Are you there yet? Shannon, in my room. Stu is in the bathroom. He's acting strange. Anthony, what's the difference? When are you going to leave Stu so I can be with you all day? Shannon, I told you from the beginning that I can't and won't do this, Tony. Stu is a wonderful husband. He loves me, cares for me, and gives me the kind of life you could never give. Anthony, but I'm better in bed than he is. Shannon, oh God, yes. Stu and I are looking to start a family, so these 2 weeks are just for you, baby. I told Stu I'd stop taking the pills when we got home, but I actually stopped taking them almost 3 weeks ago. So now you have a chance to give me a child. If you can do this in the next 2 weeks, we'll create a baby that Stu will raise thinking it's his. Anthony, you're so slutty, Shan, but I love it. I'll make a baby in your belly. Shannon, God, you're turning me on. I can't wait to feel you inside me. Anthony, what about Stu? How do you know he won't get ahead of me in these 2 weeks? Shannon, because he's not going to have sex with me, stupid. I'll tell him that I'm on my period again and, oddly enough, will continue throughout the holiday. Lol. Anthony, are you sure he'll believe it? Shannon, of course. He loves me and knows that I would never lie to him. Besides, when we get home, I will compensate him for this. Anthony, damn, he's so stupid. He's such a loser. Shannon, Stop calling him that or you'll be a loser. You will lose me forever. Anthony, we both know you won't let that happen. You need me too much. Shannon, that's true, but I still don't like it when you talk about Stu like that. He is a good man. Anthony, okay, meet me in the lobby. Shannon, give me 5 minutes. I stood there in complete shock, started to put her phone back and stopped. There is a possibility that I could use these messages as evidence in a divorce. I started replacing her phone with mine and thought, to hell with her. My phone contains all my personal information. She created this mess. Let her sort it out. I took both phones. I don't think it will take her long to realize her phone is missing, but by then I'll be gone. I could feel the bile rising in my throat, triggering my gag reflex. I walked to the window and looked out at the beautiful Caribbean Sea. 8 hours ago, I was the happiest person on earth, preparing for 2 weeks of romance in the tropical sun with the love of my life, my wife, my soul, and now my world was crashing down around me. I have never felt more alone, shocked, and angry in my life. I wanted to hurt them, to destroy them for making a pathetic fool out of me. Luckily, the rational part of my brain gradually took over. Divorce was inevitable. There was no way to stay with the cheating bitch that was my loving wife. I wanted more. I wanted revenge. Looking out the window, I accidentally glanced at the pool and saw them there, hugging each other, engrossed in a passionate kiss. Anthony lowered his hands and caressed Shannon's buttocks, and she raised her right leg and pressed herself against his thigh. I felt sick, but I took a deep breath and picked up the video camera that I had bought specifically for this trip, but now used to record their actions. I think while Shannon was unpacking, she didn't bother to look out the window of our room. Otherwise, she would have noticed that the pool was clearly visible. The camera had decent magnification, so I was able to get good close-ups of them tongue-kissing. I felt sick watching it, but I knew I would use it against them later. I needed a plan quickly, but my stomach was in cramps and my brain was in a daze. Then it occurred to me, how was she going to spend time with her lover if I was nearby? They must have a plan to somehow distract me while they have sex. Thinking about it, I realized it was simple. Shannon wants 2 weeks with her lover Anthony so she can give him a baby, and I want revenge, so why not take it now, instead of waiting and ruining their plans? First, I needed to figure out how they were going to distract me. As I continued recording, I saw them kiss again, and Shannon quickly turned around and walked away. She would be back in our room any minute, and I needed to pull myself together. I went to the bathroom and turned on the shower to try to relax. If she asks, I'll tell her it helps me relax after a flight, and I want to get rid of the airplane smell. 5 minutes later, I heard the door to our room open and close. I'm back, she called. I bought us water and tampons. Great, I'll be out of the shower in a minute. Why did she need water? The resort provides water bottles in all rooms. Then it dawned on me. She's going to put me to sleep. It must be so. My brain was now feverishly figuring out how to deal with this. If I don't drink the water she brought, she'll get suspicious. If I drink, and she turns out to be a sleeping pill, I will pass out, and she and her lover will be together. What to do? I turned off the shower and dried myself slowly, feverishly wondering what to do. Then Shannon knocked on the door. Are you okay? You've been there for a long time. Her voice sounded worried. I wonder if she was worried about me or about being late for the date. My anger began to rise again, but I held it in, opened the door, and saw her standing by the bed with a bottle of water in her hand. She handed me another, already open. We need to maintain water balance with this climate change. She looked into my eyes, then quickly turned away. I took the bottle and pretended to take a long swig as I turned towards the bathroom. He quickly and quietly spat the water into the sink and emptied the bottle. Taking one of the bottles of water from the bathroom counter, I filled the empty bottle Shannon had given me. After leaving the bathroom, I continued to drink my water. I started looking around our room and noticed that she had put down a sexy red dress. Is this what you're going to wear to dinner? It seems like a waste if we can't have sex. You know how much this dress turns me on. As I said this, I knew she was dressing for him, not for me. Well, I brought it, so I might as well wear it. She smiled. Aren't you tired after all this traveling? You must be exhausted. Bingo, I thought. The bitch actually put something in my water. But how can I beat this? I needed more proof of their affair, so I pretended to feel tired. I took another sip of water, then let my eyes close slightly, as if I was sleepy. In fact, I felt like I had drunk several cans of Red Bull. My heart was beating wildly in my chest, and I did my best to look sleepy. Now that you mention it, I'm actually a little tired. What time do we need to be ready for dinner? I asked lazily. They start serving in a couple of hours. Why don't you lie down and get some rest? I'll wake you up when it's time to get ready. She said with such sincerity that I almost believed her. I yawned. Okay, honey, I really need a rest. Just don't let me sleep too long. I want to spend as much time as possible with you. I love you so much. I saw her flinch as if I had hit a nerve. I love you too, she said with less confidence. I lay down on the bed and slowly pretended to fall asleep. Soon I was snoring quietly and heard Shannon take out her phone to make a call. Hey, it worked. He passed out. And how long will that keep him going? That means we have all night. Cannot wait. She giggled and I almost vomited, but I managed to hold on and continued to fake sleep. I'll meet you at the Sandpiper Bar in an hour. I want to freshen up a little. She giggled again. You are so bad. I can't wait, lover. Bye. She hung up and continued to prepare for her date. I watched her with half-closed eyes as she chose her underwear, of course, a thong and a push-up bra. What a bitch. My anger began to rise again, but I kept myself under control, pretending to pass out. It took another 45 minutes for her to get ready, and as soon as she walked out the door, I jumped up and started getting dressed as quickly as I could. While I was lying there, I had time to think of a plan. First, I wanted more video evidence of their relationship. Secondly, I wanted to ruin their plans for the remaining 2 weeks. I wasn't sure how exactly to do this, but I knew that in the end they would both suffer. Third, I planned to go home a few days before our trip ended and begin divorce proceedings. I wanted to get ahead of Shannon so she wouldn't have time to drain our bank accounts and cancel all our credit cards. No, I will do this, not her. Once I got dressed, I took the video camera I was using earlier and left the room. It worked well in low-light conditions, or so the advertisement said. I was going to check it out on my way to the bar. The resort wasn't too big and only had 2 bars, both ocean views, but the Sandpiper was the bigger one and had a dance floor. I found a strategic spot behind some low palm trees that gave me a full view of the bar, but far enough away that I wouldn't be seen. The zoom on the camera allowed me to take good pictures. There weren't many people in the bar, which made it easier for me to find my target. Shannon was wearing the same red dress that I had once loved, but now it only made me angry and hateful. Anthony was all in her arms, and it took all my self-control and will not to pounce on the bastard and beat him to death. No, I had to remind myself that I came here to get evidence, not to end up in jail. I started recording them when they were acting like lovers in the Caribbean. They laughed, touched each other, and kissed, as lovers do, just like Shannon and I did. After about an hour, the DJ starts playing music, and they started dancing. After watching them on the dance floor for over an hour, I couldn't take it anymore and prepared to go back to my room, alone. Then I noticed how they quickly left the dance floor. Carefully, I began to follow them, keeping my distance so as not to be noticed. As I followed them, I noticed that they sometimes stopped to kiss and touch each other, and I recorded it all on video. They soon reached his room, which was located at the back of the resort. It was smaller than ours and on the first floor, without a view of the ocean. This guy must be on a budget, I thought. They entered the room, and I quickly moved closer to try to look inside. Fortunately, the curtains were not completely closed and the window was slightly open, so I could hear their conversation and write down everything that was said. Looks like this guy likes to see who he's sleeping with because the light was on. They started kissing and undressing each other, and I recorded every moment of their togetherness. I continued my watch over his room and recorded their lovemaking for what seemed like an eternity. It was already approaching midnight, and I thought that she would soon return to me, but then I heard their conversation. "Are you sure these pills are safe? I don't want him to die from an overdose or have a seizure," she asked with some concern in her voice. How touching. "Hey, don't worry about him, honey. He'll sleep for at least another 6 hours. He may wake up with a slight headache, but nothing more. You only gave him one pill, right?" "Yes, just one." "Why? What would happen if I gave him two? I don't want to overdose." The bastard laughed. "No, no, don't worry. If you gave him two, he'd be out for 12 hours or more. Just keep giving him one before bed, and we can spend every night together. I want you to get pregnant before we leave. Here's an extra key card for my room. If you can escape him during the day, call me, and we'll meet here." Then they both laughed, and it made me so angry that I threw up. I had heard and seen enough for one night, so I quietly left and headed back to my room. Now I had to plan how to destroy them both and make them feel the pain they had caused me. It was clear that she was going to spend every night with him, so the first thing I was going to do was change those plans. When I returned to my room, I looked through what I had written. It was hard to watch, but I began to formulate a plan that would hopefully completely ruin their trip. First, I needed to find a way to separate them so that I could keep an eye on my lover and find out what he was doing. I thought about putting him to sleep, as Shannon had tried to do to me, and then beating him to a pulp until he passed out. He will not be able to identify the attacker, and I can go unpunished. The question is how to separate them. That's when I came up with the idea of sending Shannon to the spa. The resort had a spa offering massages, facials, and even makeup. It would be easy to buy a package and give it to her as an apology for last night and as a token of my love. If she tries to refuse, I'll tell her it's non-refundable and give her a giant guilt trip like she's done to me in the past. She won't be able to refuse my gift, and it will keep her busy for several hours. Enough time for me to deal with this bastard. I changed into shorts and went back to bed. As I lay there, fully awake, I couldn't stop thinking about the two of them together and how I was going to beat that bastard up. Shannon returned to the room around 5 a.m., quietly changed her clothes, and climbed into bed, snuggling next to me. Again, I wanted to push her away, but I remained motionless, pretending to be asleep, and waited for the right time to wake up. A little after 7 a.m., I started to stir and slowly pretend to wake up. Shannon was fast asleep, so I got up, took a quick shower, and went out to find the spa, hoping they would open early so I could buy her a package that would keep her busy long enough for my business. Also wanted to check if I could fly home the next morning as early as possible. Found the spa and saw it was open, so I went inside to see what they were offering as packages. The nice young woman behind the counter helped me choose a package. I was more interested in how long the procedures would take than in their content. Having chosen a package that lasted almost 3 hours, I asked what the earliest time could be to book. The woman checked the computer and said the first available time was 2 p.m. I thought about it and decided to take this package and arrange a surprise for my wife. With that all settled, I went to look around the area, figuring Shannon needed some sleep after spending the night with her lover. Around 9 a.m., I returned to the room and found her still sleeping, so I reached into her purse and found her phone. I checked her text messages and read one from him, sent in the last hour. "Anthony, you were great last night. Any chance you could sneak away from Stu for a little afternoon fun?" My anger returned, but I controlled myself. I was becoming a master of self-control, but now I knew the end was near. Shannon started to stir, so I put her phone back and walked over to gently kiss her forehead. "Good morning, sleepyhead. I'm sorry about falling asleep last night and ruining our dinner plans, but I have a surprise for you." She smiled and yawned. "What a surprise." "I booked you a day at the spa as an apology for last night and to show you how much I love you." Even in her sleepy state, I noticed how she flinched slightly and saw a look of uncertainty in her eyes. At that moment, I realized that she doubted whether she really loved me. I looked into her eyes. Everything is fine. Don't you like my gift? Oh no, I love him. I just wish you had asked me first. She smiled faintly. If I had asked, it wouldn't have been a surprise. Look, this doesn't mean you need to run to the spa right now. I booked for 2 p.m., so we have some time to spend together. Fine. She nodded. You are very thoughtful, thank you. Then she kissed me on the cheek, and I thought I smelled semen on her breath. What a lying bitch. Okay, why don't you wash up, and then we'll go get breakfast? I got out of bed when she sat up. Fine. She then got out of bed, picked up her purse, and went to the bathroom. I knew what she was going to do, but I didn't want her to suspect anything, so I went to the window and saw a curious picture. Anthony was by the pool talking to two young women, occasionally glancing at his phone. Then I saw him typing something and putting his phone away. She must have told him about my surprise, but he didn't seem too upset. His attention soon returned to the two women, who appeared to be laughing at something one of them had said. He then made a gesture with his hand, and the three of them walked out of my sight. It occurred to me that maybe Anthony was making alternative plans in case Shannon couldn't escape for the afternoon fun. This may be useful. About an hour after that, Shannon and I stood at the breakfast buffet filling our plates. Well, I was filling my plate, and she just took some fruit and coffee. Aren't you hungry, honey? Is it because of your period? I asked. Yeah, it's probably because of that. I really don't want to eat. She was distracted. I couldn't help but wonder what Anthony said in his message because it was clearly bothering her. Well, it didn't really matter. My plan seemed to be working on them, or at least on her. After breakfast, we decided to walk along the beach and look at the ocean. I took my camera with me and photographed the beach, palm trees, and Shannon. She smiled politely, and I made comments such as how beautiful she was and what a wonderful mother she would be. And again, I noticed that shudder, that look of uncertainty and guilt on her face. What happened, honey? Are you okay? I knew her guilt was beginning to gnaw at her. No, I'm fine, just a little tired. Do you mind if I go back to the room to take a short nap before visiting the spa? Sure, no problem. I know it's not very nice to be on vacation and have your period at the same time. Go lie down and I'll come back to the room after your spa session. I'm sure it will do you good. She turned and walked back to the resort without even kissing me goodbye. Well, I'll give her a kick before it's over. Now I had to find Anthony and make him pay. As I continued my walk along the beach, lost in my thoughts, I noticed two couples walking towards me. I recognized the women. They were the same ones who had been talking to Anthony by the pool that morning, and now they were with two very large guys who looked like Vikings quarterbacks. As I got closer, I began to hear them talking. Well, honey, don't be like that. You knew Dave, and I wanted to go sea fishing, and there were 2 spots available. We'll be back before dinner. Yeah, sure, just like you guys go off to do whatever you want while we're stuck here at the hotel. Honey, there are a lot of things to do here. Go to town, go shopping, sunbathe by the pool or on the beach. Heck, you can even use the gym they have here. Are you saying that I'm fat? You should look at yourself. No, honey, that's not what I meant. There's just a lot of things here that you could do, that's all. I knew it was a losing argument for him as they passed me on their way back to the resort, but he continued to convince her, to no avail. After wandering around the beach for a bit, I decided to go back and find out what my lover was doing. Was afraid Shannon missed her spa session and was with him, but if that's the case, maybe I can make another video. I wandered around the resort for over an hour and finally found myself in front of his room. Voices could be heard from inside, but not Shannon's. I quietly prepared my camera and moved closer to the window. It was risky because it was daytime and many people could have passed by. I decided to install the camera on the windowsill, pointing it inside, and leave it to record. After setting up the camera, I walked down the path and found a place where I could watch the door and see who was coming out. Time passed slowly, but my patience was rewarded. The two women I saw with Anthony in the morning at the pool, then again at the beach with those guys, came out of his room. They smiled and giggled as if they knew some secret. As soon as they left, I grabbed my camera and walked back to my room. Shannon wouldn't be back from the spa for another hour, so I had time to review what I had recorded. Back in the room, I connected my camera to my laptop and began downloading all the videos I had taken since we arrived. Most of it was with Shannon and that bastard, but then I watched what I just recorded when the two girls were in his room. Looks like they found something to do while their boys were offshore fishing. Anthony convinced them to give him a threesome. That's when another idea came to me, and if everything worked out, I'd be home while Shannon was here, trying to figure out what the hell happened. I knew she would probably try to put me to sleep again that night, so I would repeat my game and pretend to pass out. Then, with luck, they'd meet at a bar to dance and drink before heading back to his room. If I can slip one of those pills into their drinks at the end of the night at the bar, they'll pass out as soon as they get to his room, or even before. Everything must be done at the perfect time, but in life, things rarely go according to plan. The second part of my plan was to make a DVD copy of Anthony's latest adventures. I have to admit, I was a little jealous of the bastard that he managed to convince two very beautiful women to have sex with him together. I had the DVDs and made 2 copies of his day's adventures. Now I needed to find out what rooms these girls and their boyfriends were staying in. I also made a copy of all the videos I had taken since our arrival onto another DVD so I could have evidence. I went to the front desk and sent the disc to my brother Frank with a note asking him not to look at it or tell anyone that I had sent it. This is in case my plan fails or Shannon and Anthony realize what I'm up to and want to physically harm me. If I get killed, this disc sent to my brother will show the police who is behind it. After checking the time, I realized that Shannon would be finishing up at the spa soon, so I decided to take a quick walk around the resort and try to figure out which rooms the two women and their boyfriends were staying in. I was sure their boyfriends would be interested to know what their girlfriends did while they were fishing. Soon I saw those two women rising from the pool with towels in their hands. I followed them, and they were clearly heading towards their rooms, and soon I saw them enter 2 rooms next to each other. This solved one part of my plan. Now, if everything goes according to plan and Shannon and Anthony repeat their scenario from last night, I could completely ruin the rest of their trip tomorrow morning. I returned to my room and called the airline to find out what the earliest flight I could take the next morning. The best option was a 10 a.m. flight, which was later than I had hoped, but I booked it anyway. I then went to the front desk and advised that my wife and I had to leave the next day due to a family emergency at home and that we would be checking out at 8 a.m. They expressed sympathy and wished me luck. I thanked them and returned to the room. Now I was determined to my plan, come what may. If something goes wrong, I'll still take the plane in the morning and be home before Shannon. At least I'll be able to give her a little chaos before she gets back. But if, by a miracle, everything goes according to plan, she'll be stuck here for days, maybe weeks, before getting home, and that will give me time to really set her up. The plan was quite simple. First, pretend I was put to sleep so Shannon and Anthony could spend the evening together. Second, go back to the bar, watch and wait for the right moment to spike their drinks with the pills Shannon tried to use on me. If I do this right, they should pass out before they get to his room or as soon as they get there. Third, once they're unconscious in the room, I'll move Shannon back to our room and then come back and take everything Anthony has. I plan to take his wallet, cash, passport, credit cards, clothes, everything he brought for the trip. Fourth, find the phone numbers of the two women he had sex with and place DVDs under the doors with the hope that one of the guys will see them first and turn them on. I'm sure they won't be happy with what their girls did while they were fishing. Anthony's number was clearly listed in the video, so they should have no problem finding him. Fifth, do the same to Shannon as you did to Anthony. Take everything she brought with her and leave her only the clothes she was wearing and her purse. I'll put a small note in her empty wallet so she knows who's behind this. Now everything was ready. All that remained was to wait for the players to fulfill their roles. Shannon returned to her room at 5:30 p.m., looking more relaxed and radiant than ever. It hurt me to think about how she had ruined our marriage and how I would never be with this beautiful woman again. Stu, thank you so much for the spa day. It was amazing. I feel like a completely new person. She really glowed. I'm so glad you liked it. When I told you about it, you didn't seem thrilled, but I'm glad you liked it. I just wanted to show you how much I love you. I noticed her shudder again and saw tears in her eyes. Thanks again. I love it and I love you. This time she said it with much more conviction and feeling. Any time, honey. We have dinner reserved for 7:00 p.m., so let's rest a little and then get ready for dinner. She nodded and headed to the bathroom, taking her purse with her. A few minutes later, she came out with 2 bottles of water and handed one to me. Drink this, I'm going to want to dance tonight, so you better start hydrating now. She winked at me. Okay, just let me go to the bathroom first. I chuckled. Once inside, I repeated the same procedure as before, emptying the bottle and then refilling it with water from one of the bottles on the counter. I flushed the toilet to make it look like I actually needed to go, and then went back to the bedroom. I continued to drink my water, and after 15 minutes I began to act out the dream. Soon I was snoring, pretending to be asleep, and watched as Shannon began to prepare for what would be her last date with Anthony, although she didn't know it yet. She went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I quickly got out of bed and grabbed her phone to see what her lover was texting her. Shannon, can't get out this afternoon. Stu bought me a spa pass. I can't say no. Anthony, no problem, honey. I have other plans right now. Will we still meet tonight? Shannon, oh yeah, I need you. Anthony, I can't wait. My rage wasn't as intense after reading this crap because I knew the end was near. Now all I had to do was follow them at the bar, watch them dance for a few hours, and then slip something into their drinks. Easily, well, maybe not entirely. I rummaged through her purse and found the key card for Anthony's room. I put it in my pocket and returned everything to its place. Shannon spent a little extra time preparing and then did something completely unexpected. She sat down on the bed next to me and gently touched my cheek. Baby, after this week, I will be all yours, I swear. I just had to do this before we started our family. I wish I could tell you and make you understand, but I need to do this. These few days are for me. I wanted to tell you, but I knew you would leave me, and I need you more than you can imagine. I love you so much, but I really need to do this. Then she leaned over and kissed my cheek, whispering, I love you so much, Stu. At first, I thought that she might have realized that I was awake, but then I realized that she was trying to calm her own conscience, but it was too late for that. Soon she was fully dressed and walked out the door. As soon as the door closed, I jumped out of bed, got dressed, and followed her. They were back in the same bar as the night before. There were more people here today than last night, and I even saw 2 women with their boyfriends from the beach that I had seen earlier that day. If my plan works, they won't be together by morning. I took the same seat as the night before and made myself as comfortable as possible with my trusty camera to record the evening's events. The night went as I predicted, and soon both were sitting at the table, just talking and laughing. It was getting late, and I knew it would soon be time to put something in their drinks. I quickly walked towards the bar, making sure they couldn't see me. There I found an empty seat near the counter where the waitresses take and serve drink orders. I ordered a beer while still watching them to make sure they didn't notice me. As I watched, I saw their waitress approach their table to take their drink order. When she returned to the bar and told the bartender what she wanted, I was lucky that it was the only order she took. I listened to what she said to the bartender, and then when he went to prepare their order, I called another bartender over and ordered the exact same drinks. The first bartender placed drinks on the tray of the waitress, who was distracted talking to another waitress. My drinks arrived, I paid for them, and then I took one of them and, keeping out of sight under the edge of the counter, broke one of the capsules and added the contents to the drink, stirring the powder to mix it better. It sizzled a little, but looked fine after I stirred it. I did the same with the other drink and was ready for a change. With a drink in each hand, I began to make my way past the waitress, keeping my body between her and the bar to make a change. I was quick, and luckily the bar was crowded enough that no one noticed me. I walked past the waitress and headed to their table to deliver the drinks to the happy couple. I quickly left the bar and returned to my seat outside to watch and wait. The waitress brought them their drinks, and I hoped my timing was correct. It was a little after 1 in the morning, so if the substance worked as I hoped, they would be unconscious until 11 in the morning or so. This would be perfect for the rest of my plan. Now all I had to do was wait for them to finish their drinks and head back to Anthony's room before they passed out. They sat sipping their drinks, and I started to get nervous. What if they don't finish their drinks? Anthony then leaned over and said something to Shannon. She smiled, and they both quickly downed the rest of their drinks and left the bar. God bless. I quickly followed them, as they were clearly in a hurry to return to the room. This time, as I followed them, I noticed that Shannon began to stagger and seemed to be having difficulty walking. Anthony took her hand and wrapped his arm around her waist, supporting her. By the time they reached his room, Anthony was also starting to unsteady. My timing in spiking their drinks was perfect, so now I just had to wait for the full effect. When they reached the door, she could barely stand, and he was staggering more and more. He fumbled with the key card, and after several failed attempts, he managed to open the door and enter the room. The door closed, and I waited a few minutes, then pulled out the key card I took from Shannon's purse and opened the door. As I walked into the room, I heard Anthony inside saying, "What's wrong, honey? You haven't had much to drink." He spoke, slurring his tongue, so I knew he would pass out soon. When I entered the room, I saw Shannon lying face down on the bed, unconscious. Anthony shook her, trying to wake her up. "Come on, baby, it's time to make a baby." He looked at me and saw me enter. "Hey, who the hell are you?" He began to straighten up and almost fell. "I'm just her husband, a jerk. Now be a good boy and pass out so I can get her out of here." As if on cue, he slowly collapsed to the floor and did not move again. Walking over to the bed, I started looking for his phone, which was lying on the floor next to him. When I picked it up, I wanted to see what messages and photos he had there. Soon I was scrolling through hundreds of photos, most of which were quite innocuous, but then I came across something important. He had a folder with dozens of images of women in various stages of undress and performing sexual acts. I didn't recognize most of the women, but I found several photos of Shannon in the nude and also performing the same sexual acts. As I continued to look through the photos, I began to recognize some of the women as teachers from the same school where Shannon taught, as well as the wives of some of the male teachers. Well, that's interesting. It looks like Anthony has been playing around with other men's wives a bit. This will soon end very ugly. I looked through his contact list to see who he had there and decided that these photos, except the ones of my soon-to-be ex-wife, should be sent to everyone on his contact list. It took me a few minutes to tag and send all these photos to all these people, among whom were several husbands of the wives whose photos and videos I found. He was going to get an unpleasant surprise when he returned home. I sent photos and videos of Shannon to her phone, and then from her phone to mine. I was going to use these later for my own purposes. What about blackmail? After turning off his phone, I began to collect all his things, clothes, toiletries, and other items that he had brought with him, just throwing them casually into his suitcase. I also checked his pockets and took all his cash, his wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and passport. I knew that without a passport, it would be very difficult for him to leave the island. When I finished packing his suitcase, I turned my attention to Shannon. She was still face down on the bed, with one leg dangling over the edge. I very carefully turned her onto her back, then picked her up and carried her back to our room. After putting it on our bed, I returned to the idiot's room to pick up all his things. I kept his phone, wallet, and cash because I thought I deserved some kind of compensation for all this. As I walked through his room, I wanted to make sure he didn't have anything left to take with him. I even took his shoes, and on the way to my room, I found the resort dumpster and threw his suitcase and shoes in there, covering them with trash so they wouldn't be found. Returning to my room, I began packing my suitcases as well as Shannon's, treating her things with the same care as Anthony's. The only things I was going to leave her here with were the clothes she was wearing, her purse, the tampons she needed, and an empty wallet with a note from me. As I was finishing packing, I noticed that it was already after 4 a.m., and I needed to be at the airport by 9 a.m. Since Shannon drank her drink around 2 a.m., she will be unconscious until at least noon. Anthony, I suspected, would wake up around 10 a.m., and I'd be long gone by the time they woke up. There was only one thing left for me to do. After leaving the room, I took the 2 DVR discs I had created earlier and went straight to the rooms of the 2 women and their boyfriends I had seen with Anthony yesterday. Very quietly and quickly, I placed a disc under each door and then returned to my room. There I looked at Shannon sleeping peacefully on the bed and felt great grief and sadness. I was so looking forward to starting a family with her, but I couldn't forgive her other plans. I walked around the room to make sure I had everything packed, then grabbed Shannon's suitcase and headed back to the same dumpster where I'd thrown Anthony's things and added her suitcase to it. Returning to the room, I checked her purse to make sure it was empty and there was no money, credit cards, or passport in it. I wanted to make sure that it would be as difficult for her to return home as it was for Anthony. Sitting down in one of the 2 chairs in the room, I was exhausted, but thought about what I should do next when I got home. The first step will be to withdraw all the money from our joint bank accounts and pay off, then cancel all of our credit cards. Then I will pack all my things and move out of our house. I was sure I would have to find a storage unit to store it all, but I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. Leave our house and this fictitious marriage. Before I knew it, I dozed off, and when I woke up, it was almost 7 a.m. Rising with difficulty from the chair in which I slept, I went to the bed, looked at Shannon one last time with sadness, then carefully picked her up and carried her out of the room. I carried her to the pool and left her on one of the sun loungers. Since I was about to check out, I didn't want her to be in the room when housekeeping arrived to prepare it for the next guests. Returning to my room, I grabbed my bags and looked around one last time to make sure I had everything I needed before leaving. I still had Anthony's phone, but then I got an idea. Returning to the pool, I picked up Shannon's phone. I started sending all these photos and videos to everyone on her contact list, except for a few. She had several nephews and nieces who were too young to see this, but I was sure her mother, father, sisters, and colleagues would find it interesting. I went to the reception and asked for a piece of tape. I took the battery out of her phone, covered the contacts with a very small piece of tape, then put the battery back in. It was as if her battery had simply died. I also made sure it didn't have a phone charging cord. Without money, she will have a hard time getting her phone to work again. It was a little after 8 a.m. when I heard screams. They were coming from one of the boyfriends of the 2 women Anthony was with yesterday. Looks like their soon-to-be ex-boyfriends watched the video I slipped under their doors. You're a bitch. You can tell your family there won't be a wedding, and I don't want to see you anymore. Find your own way home, bitch. One guy yelled at his girlfriend. The other guy just stared coldly while his girlfriend begged him. Baby, please don't leave me. I apologized. It was a very stupid mistake, and then you took revenge on him. She cried. You're a bitch. Go back to your new boyfriend. He said this so coldly that a chill ran down my spine. I wonder what they did to poor Anthony. Well, I guess I'll never know. The next sound I heard was the siren of an ambulance pulling up to the front entrance. The man, whom I assumed was the manager, came out of the office and quickly led the doctors along the path to Anthony's room. I hope everything will be okay with him. As people began to gather to see what was happening, I quietly got into a taxi and headed to the airport. I turned on my phone and noticed that I had a voicemail. I turned on voicemail and listened to a message from my brother Frank. Stu, what the hell is going on there? I got a bunch of nude photos and some very explicit videos of Shannon. I know she's beautiful, but what's going on? Are you aware of this? Call me when you get this message. When I got to the airport and was waiting for my flight, I called him back and explained the whole messy situation, how Shannon cheated on me with Anthony while we were on our vacation, and how she was trying to get pregnant with his child. He said that he was very sorry that this happened and that if I needed anything to call him. I thanked him and soon found myself on my flight home alone. Turning on Anthony's phone as soon as I landed, I found dozens of voicemails and over 30 texts threatening to cause him bodily harm. Looks like the photos and videos I sent out weren't popular. After receiving my bags, I picked up the car from the long-term parking lot and drove home. During the trip, I started planning what to do next. Divorce was an option, but I knew she would get half of everything, and that didn't sit well with me. She cheats and still gets her share of the divorce. It's just not fair. Another plan began to form as I drove, and I started making a mental list of what I would need and how to do it. She had ruined our marriage, and I was going to make her life hell. When I got home, I called my brother and asked him to help me move within the next few days. I wanted to finish before Shannon returned so she would come to an empty house. I finally turned on my phone and found over 20 voice messages and over a dozen texts. Many of them were from Shannon's sister asking what was going on and why Shannon wasn't answering her calls. Some messages were from other members of Shannon's family asking the same questions. I felt somewhat relieved that there were no voicemails or texts from Shannon herself. This meant that her phone was still not working, and she probably didn't realize what had happened yet. I smiled at the thought of her finally turning on her phone and seeing all those messages and calls asking about the photos and videos she had sent from her phone. A very unpleasant surprise awaits her. The first step was to cancel all of our credit cards and transfer all the money from our joint bank account to my personal one. I then started packing all my clothes and other personal items that I wanted to keep. All the gifts Shannon gave me over the years I threw away, unless they had value. Then I either sold them online or found a pawn shop. The home phone was switched off as soon as I got home, so anyone who wanted to find me had to call my cell phone. It was around 11 p.m. when I finally looked at my cell phone and saw several texts and voicemails from Shannon. Looks like she was able to get the phone working again. The first few texts were, "Where are you? Why did you leave and leave me here? Are you okay? I think I got robbed." Then the tone of the messages changed as it dawned on her what had happened, and she probably received numerous messages and calls regarding the photos that were sent out from her phone. Why? Why did you do this to me? We couldn't talk at first. I simply ignored her messages, thinking it would only make her angrier. The next day was eventful. I didn't know when Shannon might return, so I acted quickly. I first went out to get boxes to pack the rest of my stuff and rented a storage unit big enough to fit everything. Then I went to the bank and made sure that there was very little money left in our joint account. I transferred the rest to my business account, which I was going to close and withdraw the money, but before that I had a few things to finish. The house we lived in was a very small starter home. We decided to start small, and when our family grows, buy a bigger house. It was a simple two-bedroom house with a small bathroom and a small kitchen. Nothing fancy, and given that I had a home renovation and improvement business, we had high hopes of turning this house into something special. Now I had other plans, and I was running around the city, collecting everything I needed to make Shannon's return home unforgettable. Later that day, my brother Frank arrived in his pickup truck, and after discussing my situation, we began loading his truck with all of my belongings. It took over 5 hours and 3 trips to the warehouse, but by late evening, I had officially moved in. I didn't tell Frank about my plans for the house or what surprise Shannon had in store. I knew he would try to dissuade me, so I didn't say anything. He asked me about my immediate plans. Just leave town and leave this horrible marriage behind me. I'm not going to file for divorce, but I won't be here when she gets back. She can take the house, but that's all she'll get from me. Frank shook his head. You know that won't work. She'll just hire a lawyer and find you. Just divorce her and give her half. If you run away, it'll only make things worse when she finds you. Look, I know you're angry and you're hurt. But don't let your emotions make your decisions. Pull yourself together, hire a lawyer, and give her half. No, that bitch cheated on me and tried to get pregnant by that idiot, and then she was going to pass the baby off as mine. She deserves nothing, and she won't get anything. See, I'm not going to divorce her. Oh no, I'll just leave her with no money, and I'll expose all her dirt to everyone. Frank realized that there was no point in arguing with me. I become stubborn, and it is almost impossible to change my mind in this state. He left, but before leaving, he told me to think and not do anything rash. I had it all figured out from the moment I saw her kiss her lover. Now it's time to implement my plan. I started working on the house that night and worked until the early hours of the morning. I still didn't know when Shannon would be back, so I had to act quickly. One of the factors that played into my favor was snow. Another big storm seemed to be approaching, and it was forcing several major airports to close. Round-trip flights were canceled, giving me more time to complete my repair work. Another good thing about this storm was the additional snowfall of 20-30 cm. We already had about 30 cm of snow on the ground and roofs, which helped to implement my plan. It had been 2 days since my return, and I rarely answered calls since most of them were from Shannon. Finally, I decided to answer her call, but only to get information, nothing more. Oh, honey, please listen. It was a mistake, a huge, stupid mistake on my part. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You are everything to me. You are my life, my reason to live. Please, oh God, forgive me. I heard her cry, but it didn't move me. I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. But at the moment, I needed to play on her feelings, give her hope, and then take it away at the right moment. Shannon, you hurt me deeper than anyone has ever done. I don't know if I can forgive you or trust you again. I just want to understand why. Why did you do this to us? Don't you love me? Was I not good enough for you? I spoke calmly, but with a hint of sadness in my voice. In fact, I wanted to scream into the phone that she was a worthless bitch that I never wanted to see again. But I had to give her the idea that we had a chance to restore our relationship. Baby, please let me explain. It didn't mean anything. He didn't mean anything. You mean everything to me. You are my life, my reason to live. Please, oh God, forgive me. She burst into tears again. I waited a few minutes, then spoke. Baby, I just don't know. I loved you, but you broke my heart. I don't think we can fix this. No, honey, we can fix this, and our love will be even stronger if we can get through this. Please, honey, can you at least wait until I get back so we can talk? I heard the desperation in her voice. I don't know. When will you be back? Well, there's a problem. I don't have a passport or a plane ticket. My sister is in the process of transferring money to me since all my credit cards were stolen. Oh, by the way, don't forget to call the credit card companies and cancel my cards ASAP. It's amazing how she switched from asking for forgiveness to demanding that her credit cards be canceled. What a bastard she is. Okay, I'll do it right away, so you don't know when you'll be back. I think in a few days. I talked to the U.S. consulate here, and they are issuing me a new passport. Well, call me when you're ready to leave, okay? I'll call. Stu. Yes? I love you. See you when you get back. I hung up. So she won't be back for a few more days. Great, I thought. This will give me enough time to complete my home improvements and do a few more things to start my new life without her. The next day, Frank called to see how I was doing and invited me to dinner. I agreed since I hadn't eaten homemade food in over a week. I was living on pizza and Chinese food, and after talking to Frank, I assured him that I wasn't going to do anything rash. Then Shannon called. Hi, honey. I just got the news that I'll be getting a new passport in a couple of days. Now all I need is a plane ticket home. I can be home in a few days, and if I get an early flight, I'll be back. Home late tonight. Can you meet me at the airport? I really want to talk to you as soon as possible. That's not a good idea, Shannon. You'd better ask your sister to pick you up and bring you home. We can talk when you get there. I was simply misleading her. By the time she gets home, I'll be at least 100 miles away. Okay, honey, I love you and I know that if you give me a chance, we can get through this. Okay, Stu? Yes, of course, we'll talk and see. No promises. I lied just like she lied to me. I now had a clear idea of when she would return home, which gave me plenty of time to do a few more things to cover my tracks before leaving the city. First, I sold my work truck and bought another one, used but in good condition, registering it in a friend's name. When I had to tell my employees that I was closing the business because of an impending divorce. I was embarrassed to tell them about it at the last minute, but I couldn't leave without telling them what had happened and why. Next, I called an old friend from college who now lives in Colorado. When we graduated, he said I should come and go into business with him. He said that with all the winter houses and summer cottages, we would have work all year round. He was glad to hear from me, but was shocked by what happened between me and Shannon, since he knew her back when we were dating and always thought we were the perfect couple. I asked if his job offer was still valid and if he could use a good handyman. He said that he was even busier now that marijuana laws had changed and his workload had tripled in the last year, and that I was more than welcome to come and work for him. I asked that the work be unofficial because I didn't want Shannon to know where I was and demand money from me. Everything was ready, all that was left was to leave. Shannon called me several times a day to tell me she loved me and asked for forgiveness. She also gave daily updates about when she would return home and promised that I would have an unforgettable evening when she returned. The day has come before her return. I packed up my new truck and the house was empty. All that was left belonged to Shannon or were things I didn't care about. I left very early in the morning because I wanted to leave the city unnoticed. I asked my neighbor across the street to do me a favor and record the moment Shannon came home. I told him I would call to let him know what time she would arrive since I had a surprise for her. He didn't know about our marriage problems and happily agreed. Everything was ready when I left town and headed south to my new life without Shannon. It would take at least 2 days to get to my friend's house, and by then Shannon would already be home. As I drove, I felt less angry and calmer than I had in the past week. Ever since I saw Shannon and Anthony poolside together, I felt like my life had been flushed down the toilet, and now I was starting to climb out of that swamp of despair. Shannon called around noon to say she would be home around 4 p.m. tomorrow. She again asked me to meet her at the airport, but I said that I had things to do and that I would be home after her. She can come in herself when she arrives. I then called my neighbor and told him to be ready with a video camera to record the surprise I had planned for my wife. The next day, I was in Colorado and only an hour away from my friend's house when I received a call from Shannon. The house, it just collapsed, probably because of the snow. I just put the key in the lock and turned it when I heard a loud crash and the roof collapsed. "Oh my God, our house is destroyed," she cried. Well, Shannon, don't worry. I'm sure your parents still have your room. As for me, I already have other plans." I said this with joy. "What are you saying? Our house is destroyed? How can you be so happy about this?" She was starting to get angry. "Great. My renovation worked just as I planned. I arranged the house so that it would collapse when she opened the door. I installed temporary supports in the basement and then sawed all the floor joists with a chainsaw. The lock on the front door was connected to a switch that turned on a winch, which I bought at a pawn shop for a very low price. Then, using a pulley and ropes attached to temporary supports, when she turned the key, the winch began to work and the house collapsed. You see, darling, the house didn't just collapse because of the snow. I had a hand in it. I did to the house what you did to our marriage. Good luck finding a new place to live. And I'm almost there." With these words, I hung up and called my neighbor. "Stu, you won't believe what happened. Your house collapsed. It probably couldn't handle the snow, but it wasn't that much snow. At least not enough to cause that kind of destruction. Look, I got the whole thing on video, and thankfully, your wife is okay. She was trying to open the door when it happened, and it all happened so fast. Bang, and the house just collapsed." He was so excited. I told him to email me the video when he had a chance since I wanted to keep a copy. After talking with him, I turned off the phone and continued on my way to a new life. Almost 3 years passed, and I got a job in Colorado. I keep in touch with a few friends from Minnesota and keep up with the news. I didn't want to contact the family directly because I was sure they would tell Shannon where I lived. It looks like Shannon got her way and got pregnant with Anthony's baby. For some time, she told everyone that this was my child and that I ran away like a coward, unable to bear the prospect of becoming a father. Even my mother believed her because she wanted a grandson. I contacted a friend who in turn contacted my brother and asked him to convince Shannon to do a DNA test on the baby and my brother. If I were the father, the results would be close to my brother's. If I were not a father, there would be no results. Like an idiot, she agreed. The results showed that I was not the father, and my mother kicked her out of the house, screaming at her to never show up on the doorstep with that bastard again. As for Anthony, it looks like he got beat up pretty badly by those two guys at the resort and spent over a week in the hospital before he was able to go home. When he finally returned home, several more men were waiting for him, more precisely, the ex-husbands of those women whose photographs and videos I sent. Shannon returned to her parents, who were not happy to see her after this whole story. Her father, like many others, abandoned her. She was forced to look for work to feed herself and her child. Her sister, who transferred money to her, also stopped communicating with her after learning about all her infidelity. Shannon was deprived of all connections and support, and she had to start from scratch. She tried to find me, but I stayed under the radar, living under a different name and working unofficially for a friend in Colorado. My life has changed for the better. I found peace and happiness away from Shannon and her betrayal. I met a new woman who became my support and partner. We are building our home and our life together, and I have never looked back. The past is in the past, and I have learned to forgive and forget in order to move forward. Shannon may never know how much she hurt me and that her actions led to the complete destruction of our lives. But I found the strength to live on and build a new, happier life. And this is the best way of revenge, to be happy and successful, despite everything that happened. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.